everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of The Invisible Men. My name is Ian Rowe, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and also the CEO of Vertex Partnership Academies in the Bronx.
I'm Nique Fazier, as a member of the Leadership Network at AEI and an adjunct professor at Rice Business School and the Olin Business School at Washington University.
Nique, as always, great to see you. And as our viewers know, we like to highlight and feature some incredible men whose work you may not know, but certainly deserves a bigger platform. And today we're very excited to have a Renaissance man, Adam Coleman, who some of our listeners may know. He's an author of a book from Black Victim to Black Victor, which I can't wait to dive in. And I think Adam may even be giving us a preview of a book he's working on now. He's a writer for the New York Post. He started this great blog called Wrong Speak to find commonality as human beings across racial and political lines. He also just became a partner of XXXY, which is a new athletic brand that stands up for women's sports. So, Adam, there's so much to talk to you about. Can't wait to dive in. But before we dive in, we'd love to just hear a little bit more about you, how you grew up, and to some degree, when you realized, whoa, this race, my race is a thing, my skin color is a thing, or other elements of your growing up that are relevant to who you are today.
Well, I'll answer that question first as far as race goes. I want to say I was around 6 when, at least as far as the memory goes, as far as being pointed out that I was different, but not by someone who was white, but by a family member. There's sometimes like racial protectionism, like, I've heard this throughout my life. Listen, you a black man and you gotta do this, you gotta move differently, you gotta be aware that they're about to do this to you and that kind of thing. So I remember, I don't remember exactly what they said, but I remember someone insinuating that white people are almost like inherently negative. And even at that time, it didn't make sense to me because, one, most of my friends were white. They were always nice to me. Their family members were nice to me. Got along with them pretty well. And just even at that time, I was like, I know black people that were rude to us and that did these things. So like, how does that make sense into this whole equation?
Right.
So even my child brain could see how illogical that was. It might work. It might have worked if I grew up in an environment that there were no white people around. It's easy to give fear tactics to people you don't know anything about and feed off their ignorance. But it didn't really jive with me because my environment told me otherwise.
Right.
Yeah.
And have you found yourself countering those narratives do you remember when you even started having the confidence to say, well, actually, that doesn't jive with my own experience?
Well, confidence is an interesting word because throughout most of my life, I didn't really have a whole lot of confidence. I didn't really push back. I kept things mostly to myself. I didn't speak out very much. In general, I'm very quiet. I kind of keep to myself, which is why like all the things I've been doing, especially since publishing the book, is completely abnormal to my personality throughout most of my life. I was very much so, I have ideas and I think about stuff all the time, but no one cares what I think. And let me just keep it to myself. I don't want to disrupt anything. Let me just shut up. I've made a massive change as far as not only being public with how I feel, but not caring if people like it or not. I know where my heart is. I know what my intentions are, and it's okay. I don't expect people to agree with me. I don't even know, not know, but I definitely didn't have the confidence to say the things that I really felt as far as race or anything like that. And I didn't really have a whole lot of confidence in general.
And so Well, let me then leap to the book. So where was that transition? When was the moment that not only where you were gaining more confidence, but you know what, I'm going to put these ideas on paper. And so where did from Black victim to Black victor come from?
Yeah, so I want to say, if I was to go back just a little bit, 2016 was a pivotal year for me. Um, I started solo traveling, and it was kind of by accident. I was supposed to travel with someone, ended up going by myself, and spent 2 weeks abroad by myself in 4 countries. Knew no one, knew nothing about where I was going. Didn't know most of the languages while I was there. Excuse me. Um, but when I came back, I realized how much anxiety that I had before because I felt so relaxed. I had so much social anxiety about moving out in life. I used to worry about, like, if I go to this restaurant, where do I park, and what's it going to look like when I get there? Like, I was just in my head all the time, and that really eats at your confidence because you don't feel like you can respond in the moment. And so, getting over my social anxiety really helped to open me up and say, I can do this. And then from there, my career really started to take off in IT, and I just started having more confidence as far as my relationships with women, and just in general, my confidence started to grow and grow. Fast forward to 2019, I meet my now wife, um, and we begin our relationship, and I was starting to have more political open mindedness. I was a Democrat, but I was a Democrat because the information I was getting was very skewed and very limited. And so when I opened
Was most,
up, and
was most of your family Democrat as well?
my family actually isn't very political. I was just talking to my mom today. My mom, she's not political at all. Like, she has no idea. So she asked me questions. Um, but as I got older, I got exposed to other people. My ex-girlfriend got me into at least like paying attention to politics a little bit more. So, uh, but from the very beginning, it was Republicans are racist and Democrats are for black people. The typical.
Yeah.
But when I started to kind of open up and just look at things for face value and look at all sources, not just left-leaning sources, um, that's around when I met my now wife, and then our relationship started to flourish. And then, of course, COVID happens. So to kind of get to answer your question, when COVID hit, and then right after that, the boom of George Floyd, it's one thing for me to choose not to say anything. It's another thing to feel like you're not allowed to say something. And so that feeling of you're not allowed to say this thing really made me feel like I wanted to say this thing because what I'm trying to say is not irrational. And I should be allowed to say these things. And so I got a little bit more confidence as far as talking about it because I went on these online forums to initially just find out, am I crazy? Am I the only one who's thinking this?
Right.
And I found out I'm not crazy. They are. So yeah, from that point, I started writing online, and then people were encouraging me to like write more often. And then I was like, I think this is a book idea, and I had an idea of writing a book about questioning things or something like that, but it went absolutely nowhere. So I said, you know what, I think this is it. And my now wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, but she encouraged me. She said, go ahead and go for it. And the rest is history. I had zero expectations. I thought some family members maybe and some friends maybe would be happy for me and buy some copies, and maybe I'll sell a handful more outside of that. But I just cared about expressing how I felt and dedicating the book to my son. Yeah.
Adam, before we go deeper on the book and some of your writing, which your insights are magnificent. I just wanted to go
Thank you.
back to the point you made about overcoming some of that social anxiety. I think that's something that confronts young people today in record numbers. And just give us a little more about how you overcame it, how this trip and this journey to these other countries sort of helped in that process.
Yeah. And I advocate for people to solo travel, um, because if you're worried on a day-to-day basis about places that are relatively familiar to you, going to another country where you know no one, you don't know anything, you've never been to anywhere, is like throwing you into the deep end and forcing you to swim. And you realize that the world is not that scary. And matter of fact, there's so much beauty in the things that are unknown. And after that trip, I was like, I want more of that. Like there were so many things I would say no to because I was scared, or no because, well, I probably won't like it. And I just started doing the thing that was foreign to me, that was maybe an idea, but I just kind of pushed it to the side. Like a couple months ago in September, my wife and I, we went away for our anniversary. We went to Turkey, and this was my third time in Turkey, but this time got a rental car and was just driving around Turkey, going from spot to spot. And people look at me like, "Are you crazy? Like you were just driving around Turkey?" Like, yeah, just drove around Turkey. Like if you asked me 10 years ago that if I would want to drive around Turkey, I'm like, no, that sounds like a crazy idea. But it's something that was attracted to me, and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid whatsoever. So my life is completely different than just 10 years ago, well, even 5 years ago.
I got to ask one follow up because you've done a wonderful job of highlighting how your initial girlfriend and then wife has been such an important part of your process.
Mhm.
Becoming a father, what has that done for that journey and that process?
How much time you got?
As much as you need.
um, I've said this before. Growing up without my father, I didn't know how to be a man, nevertheless, how to be a father. The only thing I knew about being a father was not to be my father. Um, so from the very beginning, feeling like a young man who was kind of aimless and purposeless, like I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do or anything like that. I didn't have a father to kind of guide me. But then my son was born, and I knew my purpose was my son. Like everything that I was doing was to make sure that I'm able to take care of my son. So if I got a higher paying job, it's to make sure that I have enough where I can take care of my son, that I have insurance to take care of my son. And he was more important than myself. And it was a maturation. I had my son at 21, relatively young, but it forced me to grow up. It forced me to not think of myself so much, and to put him ahead of myself. It taught me to take some risks, and I took some risks, and some of them worked out, some of them didn't. Um, you know, but it really taught me how to sacrifice. And I think that's the number one thing about being a good parent, especially being a good father. You have to learn to sacrifice. Um, you have to want to sacrifice. And if you don't want to sacrifice for your kids, like they can feel that. Um, that means they're not a priority. And so I knew what it was like to have a father who didn't prioritize you, who just kind of came around when he felt like it.
Wow.
Brilliant.
I mean, Adam, just I guess one more question then about becoming a father.
Mhm.
There are a lot of young men who become fathers young, right? Black men, white men, we all know the non-marital birth rates,
Mhm.
particularly for young black men. Um, what do you think it is that the way you reacted, it was assuming responsibility, right? And knowing this means sacrifice, where it seems so many other young men, it's their time to run away and to run away from that responsibility. What makes the difference, do you think?
That's a great question. And I don't have a complete answer for that. I always kind of saw it as we either repeat the behavior or we reject it. I don't think there's a third option. And so either it's normal to us and we just repeat it, or we hate it and we want to reject it. And so for me, how I felt, I hated that feeling. And I'm a very empathetic person. And the last thing I want to do is to give the same pain to my son who's just born, I'm holding for the first time. Why would I want to do that to him? He's innocent in this entire situation. So for me, like, maybe it's just my personality, but I know what it's like to hurt. I know what it's like to go through all types of hurtful experiences when I'm a kid, and to go through those experiences, without your father, or even just without your father caring. Um,
Wow.
So I just knew I didn't want to do that to my son. But I don't know why some choose to get more involved and why some run away.
Yeah. Well, thank you, not only on behalf of your son, but all the generations that come after him as a
Yeah.
result of what he will have seen you do in the role of father.
Yeah. And I specifically told him, there is an order to things. I've always saw raising my son as preparing him for adulthood. And now my son, he's 19. He just turned 19. He has a job, got the job on his own. He drives. You know, all these different milestones. He even went to a bartending school on his own. He was like, I want to go to bartending school. And he just did it, studied, passed, got certified. Like, he did all of these things in basically like a year and a half span. And he did it all by himself. He didn't need me to bug him, like, hey, make sure. He's like, I got it. I'm doing it. And, he's getting ready to probably next year go to become an electrician.
Wow.
He wants to go to school for that. So, he's doing his thing, and he has work ethic. He just became the employee of the month at his job. People love him. His coworkers love him. Everybody loves him. And I'm like, that's what happens when you take care of your kid and prepare them for adulthood. And that's not just me. His mother's a great mother. She did
Yep.
her part. She nurtured him, and I did my part to prepare him for the world, and told him, listen, like, there were moments where he was a little bit lazy. I said, you cannot turn on, flip on and off work ethic. You have to just do it. And when you become an adult, no one's going to care about you. Like, you have to be brutally honest sometimes with your kids, so they don't live in la la land and get shocked when they become adults and things are difficult. It's not difficult for him. He's been working he was 16. He's been doing his thing. I've encouraged it. I've been there for him. And, as far as like how I learned to be a father, I realized when he was younger that he was a lot like me when I was a kid. So, the idea of spanking him, I did that when he was very young, just like pops, but I didn't like it. And I remember when I was a kid, I hated it, and I felt like it was unnecessary. So I just stopped doing it. And I didn't like tell him, I'm not going to hit you anymore, but I just stopped doing it. It just seemed counterproductive, and I didn't feel good doing it. And I just talked to him more. And our entire relationship has been built on, I trust you, you trust me, and we talk about everything. If there's a problem, we talk about it so we can get past it. The only time I've ever been mad at my son was when he did not talk to me about something and he hid something, and we could have talked about it and gone through it. And I gave him crap for a couple of weeks because of that. But, I've been very, very blessed because he's been a great kid. Everyone loves him. Parents love it when he comes over. He's just an amazing child.
Wow.
Yep. That's brilliant. I mean, you so many nuggets in what you articulated. Really incredible. One of your recent articles, I thought, did an exceptional job in defining the angst and concern that we as Black men in particular have for Vice President Harris. And you talked about how inauthentic she is. And instead of focusing on that, I wanted to get your opinion on who are some leaders, thought leaders, intellectuals, politicians who you consider to be authentic?
Whether you like him or not, Trump is Trump. And I know he's a divisive character, but no one thinks that Trump is fake. I've heard all types of insults and claims about Trump, but Trump has been the same guy for decades. Everybody knows this. So his behavior, his mannerisms, all that, no one thinks that it's contrived. Everyone says. I've met people who've met him, and they all say the same thing. Trump is Trump. When he goes in front of one audience versus another audience, he doesn't change himself. He's authentic when it comes to that. There are not a whole lot of politicians I can really say who are like that. I think there are a lot of politicians who morph into what they think you want. And I think regular people respect someone who's at least, not trying to manipulate them, not trying to pander to them. I mean, every politician panders, but it's only pandering if it's obvious. So like, are you being real with me? Are you just giving me fluff? Are you telling me the truth? Like, because if you're authentic, I'm more likely to believe you. If you tell me, now that you believe me and I'm authentic, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to resolve your problems. Okay, I can at least believe you in that sense. But if you're inauthentic, it's really hard to sell it to somebody. Imagine a car salesman comes up to you and he's like, "Oh yeah, there's definitely no hidden fees," and you're like, "Something's off with this guy," But if someone comes up to you in an authentic manner and he doesn't appear to be selling you something, and he's like, "Listen, I really like this car too. I got the same one. My friend has it." Like he's just talking to you like you're his neighbor, then you're more likely to believe this person. So I think politics is about selling. You got to sell yourself. That's why messaging is important. And for people who just say like, "Oh, none of that stuff matters," like, man, you don't know regular people. Because most people don't have time, like me, to sit on Twitter all day and read different articles or listen to different narratives and listen to this podcast and that podcast. They work all day, and politics isn't that interesting to most people. So they turn on and see what happened. Oh, there's a Nazi rally in New York. Oh, well, and they just move on, and that's all they have. So that's why I call it, I don't know if there's a term for it, but I call it snapshot politics. What's the snapshot that a regular person has as far as what the political climate is? And that's it. That's all they got. They got small snapshots throughout the entire campaign. And if that snapshot makes sense and they later want to think about it, or if they decide to research a little bit more, then they can. But, there's they call them low information voters. Which sounds insulting, but it's low information they just don't have a whole lot of information about any given politician.
One of the reasons, well, no, go ahead, Nique.
This is my last one on this line. Thank you, Ian. Adam, give us your perspective on President Obama's recent, I guess we'll call it a speech, telling the three of us why we're bad if we don't vote for the sister. What's your view on that?
Well, he sounded like a male feminist, to be honest with you, and male feminists aren't to be trusted. They are manipulative people because for him to come and say the only reason that we might be hesitant to vote for her is because she's a woman, like that's a strong accusation.
Yes.
About a large group of people. It's no different than saying, well, the only reason you feel that way is because all white people are racist. And it's just like, what? That's a strong accusation. Does that include that guy, that guy, that guy? Or like, does that make any sense? Of course it doesn't make sense, right? And for them to presume the most negative, insulting thing about a demographic of people like Black men, it just goes to show you the amount of collectivism that exists within that, within the Democratic Party. But even more so, I think that he felt confident saying that. And worse, despite the backlash to what he said, all these other Democrats doubled down. And that just goes to show you that the Democratic Party is doubling down on not being the party for men. They could take men or leave them. They really don't care. And it's baffling to me because I've never seen a strategy where they say, we'll take them, but we don't really need them. like, why would you do that? So it's very bizarre, but his his entire narrative towards black men was incredibly insulting. And I've said this before, if Kamala Harris loses, black men will be the scapegoat. They will say that 5% that shifted to Trump is the reason why we lost this election, not because of immigration, not because mutilating children, not because you ship their jobs overseas, not because you act like you don't care about the working class, not because of these things, not at all. Because they're a bunch of misogynistic men who can't stand the idea of a woman being in charge, as if a lot of black men ain't never seen a black woman in charge of anything. I don't know, like a household. So it's absolutely asinine. But it's going to be the scapegoat. It's already started to be that. And even Stacey Abrams, when she lost, blamed black men. And then went on television. I don't know if you saw this, but went on television, I think last week, and was implying much of the same thing.
Wow. How does this tie to the title of your book, From Black Victim to Black Victor? Because it seems like these ideologies are all connected. We have to somehow all be in a box of servitude in order to be authentically black.
So there's a chapter in my book called Ivory Tower Black Elites. And I think that's the thing we don't really want to acknowledge, is that the commonality between Stacey Abrams, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris, the commonality isn't that they're all black or minority or whatever, is that they're all of a particular class. And on top of that, they have a particular mindset. They have an elitist mindset because they say very elitist things. So it's not, you can be a rich person and be a pretty nice, I know rich, nice people. So it's not if you're wealthy, you're a bad person. It's that if you have this mindset where you think that you're better than somebody else, where you talk down to people, where you say, oh, this is beneficial for you, but any regular person could see this as insulting or scraps of what you might give somebody else. Like people can see that, regular people can see that, but the party has been so disconnected that they can't tell the difference between an insult and advocacy. And I think the Ivory Tower Black elites, the very people that I was talking about, they use race as a cover for their status. They use race as a way to get the things that they want, to manipulate people, to go after people. It just becomes this weapon or a shield, depending on how you want to use it. When in reality, they don't mess with us like that, right? If they are so blackety black and care about black people so much, how come once they get money, they always live in the same areas where there's barely anybody that looks like them? They carry themselves in a particular way. They avoid other black people. And listen, you can live how you want to live your life. I don't care where you live. I've lived in white majority neighborhoods, mixed neighborhoods. I don't care where somebody lives. But I just find it very interesting, these people who want to pretend that they're so pro-black and white people are the devil, yet they live around them, associate with them, marry them. It's just like, it's so bizarre to me. But it's because if it doesn't make sense, it's because what's coming out of their mouth is a lie and their behavior is the truth. The truth is they don't really feel this way, right? Because it's inconsistent. The truth is that they'll use this narrative of racism, of sexism, of all these different things, but they'll use the identity to distract people. They'll use identity when it benefits them. But in their normal everyday life, they don't do that. They don't do that whatsoever.
Wow. Well, I'd love to pivot for a moment. I saw this amazing ad. We're going to play it. That a new brand, XXXY, produced that is a challenge to Nike, and it's all about girl sports. So let's take a listen.
Dear Nike.
Dear Nike.
Dear Nike.
Why won't you stand up for me? Why won't you stand up for me? Why won't you?
Why do you claim to support women and girls?
Yet when we need you most,
you remain silent.
Today, males are claiming our identity.
Our sports,
Our spaces.
men and boys are stealing opportunities, medals,
Trophies.
and our future.
And it's not fair or just.
In fact, it's often dangerous. Yet you refuse to use your platform to stand up.
You say you're for social justice and progress.
So why do you allow men's rights to
Come before ours. See, with a big platform,
Comes an even bigger responsibility.
You have a chance to do the right thing.
not just do the easy thing.
So we're asking you, Nike.
So we're asking you, Nike,
So we're asking you, Nike.
as the biggest voice in all of sports,
Will you stand up for me? Will you stand up for me? Will you stand up for me?
will you stand up for me? Will you?
Will you?
Will you just do it?
So I saw some exciting news that you are now an official partner of XXXY, and they frame themselves as the only athletic brand that stands up for women's sports. So first, even before you connect that, how does this work connect to what you've been doing in terms of race, in terms of helping people find their voice? Why did you feel it necessary or appropriate to now connect to this issue?
Well, it actually started with just my relationship with Jennifer Say. We obviously followed each other on Twitter. I had met her once in person before, learned a little bit about her background, and my association started off as a joke. So some people may not know this, but I lost a bunch of weight last year, and I've been able to kind of keep it off. And she had said, "Thank you, thank you." I take up less of the camera. No, she was saying, she was kind of hinting, because it was months before she was going to announce the new brand. She was like, "Should I start a new brand? Some sort of clothing line brand?" So I said, "Hey, if you're looking for a model, let me know." And so a minute later, she sends me a message. She's like, "You serious?" I'm like, "I'm serious if you're serious." And that's literally how it started as far as the association. But as far as what she is doing, I'm in full support of what she's doing. One, she cares about the truth. She cares about biological reality. The second thing is she is very much so about fairness, especially fairness for young women in athletics. Because, yeah, it's obvious. Any normal, rational person could see, like, this person has an obvious advantage. There's a reason why we have divisions in sports between the sexes. And it's because if there wasn't, women can't compete. And that's understood. They can't compete with other athletic men in just about any given sport. So it is to make sure that women get their due. And the idea of letting someone who is biologically superior, when you have the Olympics supposed to be the top, the best of the best, and then you have someone who now identifies as a woman, as a 45-year-old man who hasn't lifted weights in a while, comes in and breaks every female record. Just the subpar man in athletics can come in and destroy every woman's record. It's like, well, what's the point of all this? Like that's how unfair this entire situation is, especially for her. She's a former gymnast when she was younger. So my association with it is much so just in supporting fairness. And I'm very much so about protecting our children. And I think something like this is about protecting children as well, because I think athletics is a great area for young women to get into. And obviously people want an opportunity to win something, but we want to do things fairly. And we should protect them from unfairness. I think that's an important aspect of being a parent and about being an adult in our society. If you see something that is blatantly unfair and immoral, you should say something about it. So I'm in full support of what she's doing.
I saw a recent a group, I think it was of students from UNR, it was in Nevada. But just in general, it seems that there are more and more young women who are athletes themselves, who are the ones who are now coming out and saying this is wrong. It seems that that's the most potent voice to really
Yeah.
address the issue.
Oh yeah. I mean, this tells you everything, that things are changing. Things are changing faster than people think. It was only a few years ago where everyone was afraid to call out the obvious, or else getting called, a transphobe. And it's like, I don't care if you're trans. I don't care how you live your life, but this is unfair. That's all this is about. And so, yeah, now you have young women who are saying, we're tired of this, and we're not afraid of that label. We're not afraid of the attacks. And even more so, and I think this is why it's important to know that you're not alone in something, because it gives you the confidence to say something knowing that you'll be backed up. And I think that's incredibly important, especially when it comes to fighting against unfairness in our society. When you feel like you're alone in something, you're more likely to shut up and just kind of keep it moving and just deal with it. But knowing that there are people who made it their mission to say, I'm going to raise my hand. This is not going to be popular, but this is unfair. And then somebody else sees that person raising their hand, they raise their hand too. And it just becomes this trickle effect. And then that's how you change society.
Powerful.
Ian, is it time for the speed round?
I think it is. Go ahead.
All right. Well, Adam, we have a one segment of our podcast that's been consistent from the beginning, which we call the speed round, where I'll offer up a couple of individuals and ask you to tell us which one you prefer, which one you believe in more, and why. So we'll start with our standard, which is Malcolm or Martin.
I would go with Martin because, at least based off of rhetoric, it came from a more Christian sense. What I recognize about human behavior is that violence begets more violence, and I think initiating violent reactions to things that you want causes more friction. Whereas if you find a more orderly fashion, things go through smoother. So if you want public change, it is much harder to get people to change their ways and their beliefs if you point a gun at them. Whereas if you appeal to their human emotions, that's why it was important when they brought cameras down to the South, so they could see, because people who lived up north had no idea things were this bad. So they could see and they could appeal to their humanity, like, this is not right. That's how you make social change. So much like what we saw, whether we agree or not, as far as the reaction to George Floyd, that made worldwide change, where people all of a sudden reacted in whether it be an overreaction, but they reacted to just one single incident. One man can change the entire world. So I think in a non-violent fashion, if you point these things out, you can make a lot of change.
So in the spirit of one man can make a massive change, Elon Musk or Steve Jobs?
That's a good question. I guess Elon. I'm not sure how I feel about Steve Jobs, so it's kind of a default answer. The stuff I've heard about Steve Jobs, kind of a ruthless guy, a bit of a perfectionist. Maybe everything that he did wasn't as innovative as people make it sound like, possibly copied other people. And on top of that, just not a fan of Apple products. But at the same time, not really a fan of Teslas. I think they're kind of, not just me, but their ratings on cars are pretty low against other vehicles. But SpaceX is kind of cool, and Twitter is relatively better than it was before. So I guess Elon Musk wins by default.
And my last one will be Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson?
Joe Rogan. I would say Joe Rogan because he's an inquisitive person and he asks questions. And he's doing this because he's just an inquisitive person. He's not a journalist. I take some issue with Tucker because he's not inquisitive when he needs to be. And he has the label of journalist. Now, if he claims he's not a journalist anymore, then whatever, he's just a guy hanging out. But he still assumes the role of journalist, and that's how people see him. And I do take issue with stuff like, I don't know, him flying to Romania to sit down with Andrew Tate while in the midst of trafficking accusations. I don't know whether he's guilty or not guilty. He hasn't had his day in court at the moment. Maybe why don't you play this one safe instead of going there and kissing his feet and making it sound like, oh, thank you so much for speaking up for young men. You know, a dead clock is right twice a day. And just because he states the obvious about certain things doesn't mean he needs to be praised. And yeah, so I think there's that aspect of Tucker where he is not inquisitive enough. And he's come to a point where anyone who says something in opposition of the mainstream, he's like, I want to hear that because it must be true. Anything that CNN is saying, the opposite must be true, and hence it must be good. You know, so, you know, what? Hitler was misunderstood? Oh, tell me more about Churchill because he was kind of the bad guy. Let me hear more. So there's definitely aspects of Tucker that when he was reined in at Fox, that's the best Tucker that we saw. When he's not reined in, he's far too, you can be inquisitive, but he doesn't know how to discern good information from bad.
Wow. Very insightful, Adam. Well, before I get to asking you to give advice to our 16-year-old kid, Daryl, I do want to give you a chance to speak about wrong speak. Because I just love your work overall, because it constantly, or it seems that you're constantly trying to find ways to give platforms for people to express their voice, who feel inhibited in some way. And wrong speak, I think, is a great title because you're trying to flip the script. So talk a little bit about what wrong speak is, how folks access it. Can they appear on wrong speak? How does it work?
Yeah, wrong speak. It initially started as a place for me to kind of complain about stuff when I was writing my book. But I had realized, and I give credit to God helping me to realize that much of the many things that I've been doing, it's not about me. You know, that feeling when I was describing before of not being sure if I'm crazy or not, I wanted to provide the opportunity for someone else to realize they're not crazy and that they're supported. And I realized early on by inviting people how cathartic it was. I had so many articles in the very beginning. It was just regular people. I saw them mention something and I was like, hey, you want to write an article about it? And they wrote something and they shared it with their family and friends. And they're like, I feel so much better getting that out there. And on top of that, getting an audience to hear what they have to say, because a lot of people think that no one cares what they think anyways. So, you know, wrong speak quickly became a place for other people to encourage them to express themselves, as long as, because I call it free speech with intellectual thought. So there's no hatred, because hatred is anti-intellectual. It's dumb. So there is no hatred on there. There's no racism on there or anything like that. And we're very key on tone. Tone is incredibly important. My articles, how I write, is very key on tone, very purposeful. And so everyone who's involved with wrong speak understands that this isn't some red meat factory. Say how you feel. And if you want to submit something, submit it. But tone is very important to us. So, and one thing I'll add, you know, two of my editors, when I met them, they were completely anonymous. One used a pseudonym and she had her picture. The other person had no picture and just used some random name. Now both of them use their full names. They show their faces. They've done podcasts, things like that. And they say it's because they saw me do it. I didn't even tell them to do it. They just saw me do it and saw that it wasn't that bad. It's not that scary. So I think the fear of cancellation is far, far greater than it actually happening. And so I'm proud just with those two people alone who've become really good friends of mine. You know, very reliable, believe in what I'm what I'm trying to do, believe in wrong speak in general, and I've gotten to meet them in person as well, and help to support them, help to provide opportunities for them outside of wrong speak as well. We've gotten people published in other publications who originally wrote something in wrong speak, especially the Federalist. So it's become a place where we're like trying to pay it forward. It's like basically like a springboard into other things if people want it. And I've personally talked to people who wanted advice, things like that, because I was able to accomplish these things. Let me help you. So it's been a great avenue for writers to get their voice out there, to have access to me, to answer questions for them. We're trying to expand on the book publishing side. Right now, we have one book other than mine, and trying to figure out how we want to navigate, that avenue in book publishing. But it's been an amazing journey, and hopefully, I have some. I have my second book that I'm working on as we speak, but hopefully, I have some news as far as the growth of Wrong Speak very soon.
Fantastic. Well, Adam, congratulations.
Thank you.
We'd like to close with an opportunity for you to give advice to a young man, an imaginary young man who we call Daryl, who's 16 years old, who lives in forgotten USA, this imaginary urban city, who Nique, you and I conceived 30 years ago when we were at Harvard Business School, and we were amidst all these narratives we heard of an endangered Black man. It was in the aftermath of the Rodney King beating, where just all the messages were, you're in this oppressive nation, that you're going to be beaten, jailed, simply because of your skin color and your gender. And yet we felt invisible. And we thought Daryl wasn't hearing from people like the three of us. So we like to end each show just giving you an opportunity. What would you say to a modern day Daryl who, maybe because of George Floyd, maybe because of this political environment that we're hearing, that Black men are once again an endangered species, who are just pure victims in this oppressive society? What would you tell Daryl?
I would tell Daryl to discern the information discern information that's coming towards him, discern the narratives that are coming towards him, and ask himself, why are they saying these things? I think that far too often we just take things in and we don't ask why. If you want to get to the source of something, you ask questions. Why is this happening? What do you mean by this? What exactly does this look like? Is this true? Right? And I think it's incredibly important for us to advocate for people to discern the information, discern if there's bias that's coming from it, discern if it makes sense. And I guess the other thing I would tell them is, you are not defined by your skin color. You are capable of doing the things that you want to do based off the work that you're trying to do. And I think it's important for people to, actually, there's a third thing I would say. Talk to people who are not from the United States. I think that's something that is completely lost on a lot of Americans. We have so many immigrants in this country, but we never ask, well, why did they come to this country? You're not getting up and going to another country, but yet these people knew that they wanted to come here. Why? And if we had these genuine conversations with immigrants, they would tell you, one, where they came from is far worse. And so you should be thankful for being in a country that is far better than where they came from. And two, they see something special here. So what is it that is special here? And I think because things become so normal, we don't see it as special. And so, yes, we obviously have problems where, the election is a couple weeks away, and there are things to fix. But man, there's no other country that I would want to live in besides the United States.
Wow. Thank you for ending on that optimistic note. And it's true. Young people in general need to realize the freedoms that we have here in the United States. Well, Adam, thank you for joining us for this latest episode of Invisible Men. All of our episodes are on www.invisible.men. And with that, thank you, Adam. My name is Ian Rowe.
Adam, what a pleasure. You are such an important voice in this journey of America, and just really, really proud of the contributions you've made to date. Can't wait for that next book, and just keep on fighting.
Thank you. I appreciate you both.